Okay, hello everyone, and welcome once again to Cartoon Syndicate. I am Paul Densmore. I wanted to take a quick look at one of my heroes, and this should pretty much be a hero to anybody that does any form of sequential art. In fact, we really wouldn't have the name itself, sequential art, if not for this man here, Will Eisner. This is one of my old collections, one of my old spirit collections. I think this one was put out, well, it would have been put out before the Frank Miller picture, which was kind of a bit of a travesty. You would think two sort of great household names in comics, you know, and maybe not necessarily household names, but, the spirit, he had his heyday. Not quite as recognized today as he should be. But Frank Miller certainly, Dark Knight Returns, Sin City, etc., etc. 300, should have some degree of clout. But putting the two together, not such a great idea. The main thing was giving him a superpower. The whole thing with the spirit is he's pretty much just a regular guy, and he just happens to basically be a cartoony comic book character that can take insane amount of punishment because, well, you know, he's existing within a newspaper strip in comics. And one of the guys that taught me how to write comics, Mark Neese, one of his big claim to fame was that he did a really good spirit strip, kind of right before Will Eisner died, that Will Eisner really liked. And so, what I want to look at today is we're going to look at we're going to look at a complete story, actually. But before you get excited, realize that this is a spirit story, so it's basically only 7 pages. But as you'll see, technically I'd only call it 6 pages, but even that might be stretching it. We might even just call it a 5-page story. 1 page is more of an announcement. Then we've got kind of an exposition page, and then we get into the story itself. But yeah, we're going to look at the entirety of it, and really, it was one, even before I had any of these collections of the spirit stories, this was the spirit story that I wanted to read. We're going to be looking at it because of pacing, I think coming from a newspaper background, the spirit being a strip, and a newspaper featurette, really helped Eisner understand how to pack the maximum impact into a short amount of space. And so we're going to look at pacing, at the precision of pacing, okay? Now, I first ran across this in some of Eisner's other books. Mainly this one, Comics and Sequential Art. I was one of those guys, even though I'm 40-something right now and really only kind of getting serious about pursuing comics. I've always known that comics was kind of my path. So, I think I got my first copy of How to Draw Marvel Comics at 12 years old. It would have been in maybe 11, maybe 12. And I remember I was in this club at school, sort of basically just the clique that I hung out with, a group of friends. And we made, basically that was our entire life. We would buy comics, we would talk about comics, and we would make comics. And so I was the first guy to get How to Draw Comics the Marvel way. Found it in a bookstore. And brought it to school one day, and it was like gold, it's like, oh, I've heard of this book, And so, everybody, I didn't get it back for quite a while because everyone had to borrow it, and kind of, no one was really studying the principles. Everybody just wanted to copy the the drawings out of it and think that somehow magically they would, automatically understand. But in a way, it is kind of that. So that's really why I'm doing all of this and studying all of these old guys. It's like, okay, well, by studying them, it's almost through osmosis that we can pick up better tools to put into our comics, so that not only are we making more comics, we're making better comics. And so this one right here is one of my favorite books of all time, Comics and Sequential Art, Principles and Practice of the World's Most Popular Art Form by Will Eisner. And I think I got this when I was 17, 18, somewhere around there. And it really was that sort of how to draw a comic, even more so. This one almost felt like being given a golden ticket, And I want to look at some of the principles in here in another video. But I really want to try to break down each concept. So we may do a series of videos on that. And then we'll also kind of tie it in with this one. This is almost the sequel. This is Graphic Storytelling by Will Eisner. And you will see that I hate, for whatever reason, I've always had a thing about dust jackets. I really can't stand them. And this is an odd book, Graphic Storytelling. It's almost like Eisner can't ever really figure out who his audience is. It's almost like he's talking to kids at some point, and then at other point, he's got these really revolutionary kind of comics. Like he's got political stuff in there, like hardcore political stuff, and then like very graphic, violent stuff, and even some full frontal nudity and things like that. And then he'll break into characters almost doing baby talk, So it's like he never really can figure out who his audience is trying to be. But that almost kind of reflects his style as well. He's kind of on that edge where he never can quite break away from, the comics that he's done into the past, or break completely into the comics that he's trying to do, like the Dropsy Avenue and the Contract with God stuff, which is amazing stuff. I'd love to take a look at that one day. But again, we'll try to get into, like one concept per page. One concept per video in this, because he really breaks down things like timing and pacing and etc. But this was the book here that introduced me to the story that we're going to read today, and it only introduced the very last page. And the odd thing about that is that the last page of this story, you pretty much have holographically, or even fractally, the entire, and I know that I use those adjectives a lot, but you pretty much have the entirety of the story within that last page. But you won't get the effect of it. All right, so this one will just break into it. Again, this is a short page. More concept thumbnails from Martian Mouse. What do you know? All right. And like I said, this is kind of a very odd splash page to begin, because you're not really giving any exposition or anything else besides, this figure with a very dour look on his face flying, unaided. But it's simply telling you, look, this is not a usual spirit story. If you're coming into this story expecting yucks and a good time and some action and maybe some, cute female characters and femme fatales, this ain't gonna be that. This is the story about Gerard Schnabel. All right, so this one is actually called The Story of Gerard Schnabel. It's a spirit story. All right, so that's our first page out of the way already. 7 pages down to 6. Next, we get another splash page, and this is an exposition splash page. And this is one of the coolest splash pages. I love this effect, this black and white photography that almost looks like grease pencil. You know, it's that blurry, grainy black and white photos mixed with really, hold on, mixed with really well done pieces of text and color text and exposition. So basically, this whole thing is telling you that Gerard Schnabel was an ordinary boy until his 8th birthday when he fell off a roof, and rather than falling to his death, he started flying. Okay. And so that's all that page is telling you, but it's telling you so beautifully, especially with these falling, tumbling, kind of ticker tape pieces of paper looking like it's falling off a building, and we follow it down, and then we come to young Gerard Schnabel. Now on the very next page, all that's sort of reversed because we get the father over here spanking young Gerard Schnabel, basically telling him, don't ever fly again. Okay? Just be a normal person. And that kind of explains the almost philosophical aspect of what we're going to get from this. And we won't talk about that until we get to the end, if we do talk about it. I would rather you kind of read into it yourself, but I'm really here just to look at pacing because, okay, now we're down to 5 pages. Not even a full complete 5 pages because we have that last little bit of exposition out of the way. Now, we've got slightly less than 5 pages, and we've got an entire story to tell that's going to have emotional impact. All right, this is one of the most suspect things I've ever seen. This group of bankers, this guy's worked for him for 35 years. And they're like, hey, finally we're going to promote you to night watchman. Wow, huge promotion. But on the night that he's promoted to night watchman, there just happens to be a break-in. And so they break in, they rob the place, they lock him in a vault. The bankers come back. Oh, good old steady Schnabel. What is the meaning of this? After 35 years of trust in you, we feel betrayed, Schnabel. You are fired. Simply because they had a bad security system. But that's the whole point. We're supposed to feel this is a hard luck, this is that old-timey hard luck character. And so all of this is taking place in one page. This guy's gone from an 8-year-old who can fly to an ordinary guy who has tried to never fly for the rest of his life. I'm going to quit moving the book up and down so that we can stay in focus. And has had a steady life, and that steady life is now gone. Okay, so he's been made to repress his gift, and now and for 35 years he's repressed it very well, tried to lead a normal life, and now that life is gone. Okay, now that I think of it, I can kind of relate more to this story than I originally even thought. Okay, this is where the pacing really kind of gets important. All right, so we cut straight from the bank. So we've gone from an 8-year-old Schnabel, then the story has really begun, and it's gone from good old Schnabel, we're promoting you, first night as a night watchman, who's there, bonk, hit in the head, knocked out, bank's robbed real quick, wakes up in the vault, bankers are already there, hey, scapegoat. That's why I say it's one of the suspect. It's almost like, hey, scapegoat. But that's never really mentioned. So, you're fired. Okay, we have another one of these great grainy old New York shots there. And we've got this little picture of Schnabel kind of wandering along the streets, woe is me. And while Gerard Schnabel blunders sadly through the streets, you can really tell this is almost one of those Great Depression books where it's like, he lost his job, whatever, happens 5 times a second these days. Poor old Schnabel, who cares? And then we get into the spirit story. So they're already, him and Dolan, the old kind of police chief there, they're chasing, as it turns out, the guys that robbed the bank. Okay, so as if these guys can't do enough to him, not only is he going to get fired, but we'll see what they do to him later. All right, and again, we're already on the 4th page of a 7-page story. All right, they're like, okay, well, he's like, well, they could escape by helicopter. Oh, hey, there was a helicopter landed on a building. Let's hurry up and get there. Boom. Just happens to pull up right as Gerard Schnabel is crossing the street, as he's calling himself a failure. He can't do anything right. But hey, now I can remember 35 years later, it's finally coming back to me. I can fly. And I want you to take a look at kind of the sparsity of the background. Ditko gets, people hone in on Ditko doing these kind of one-dimensional backgrounds, but you'll even see that the one dimension, he adds in some 2 dimensions, kind of like Ditko does sometimes. But I mean, that's a very common trope. You'll see that in old animation as well, old Looney Tunes. They use that a lot. It's kind of like a Maurice Noble type of jazz time design. It's very cool, and I highly recommend. George Perez once told me, I met him at a convention years ago, and I told him, what was the secret to making good comics? I asked him, and he was very, he was right on the ball. I mean, he answered automatically, didn't even have to think about it. He said, draw backgrounds. He said, you wanna make good comics, draw backgrounds. And so I've always tried, even if it's just like Kirby designs or something like that, try to put it in a background. Ditko simplified Maurice Noble type designs. I mean, think about how simple that is. It doesn't take much, This here, going back to that Alex Toth thing, if this wasn't in color, think about how those blacks would read, okay? This is just a black wall, the inside of an elevator, but, for all intents and purposes, a wall with, the buttons over there. Very simple, okay? So now we've got Gerard Schnabel going up to prove to everybody that he can fly. So he's going up to the top of the building, and the spirit is going up to the top of the same building at the same time to catch the guys that got him fired. So this is already turning into one of those, sort of moral, a fable, basically, where everything just kind of, the universe just happens to be corresponding and conspiring to teach us all a lesson. All right. Now we have this really interesting pause. So everything has gone at a clip. And now it's like, okay, let's pause, and we're waiting for the elevator to go up. Roof, please. Yes, sir. And we even have, and so this lasts 3 panels. So entering the elevator, waiting in the elevator, a narrow panel here of the elevator going up to the roof, and then boom, both of them getting out. Okay? And they're both so focused on their own lives. This is sort of like how they say you never know what someone that you meet on the street is going through, or what their life is like. I think Richard Bandler, the neurolinguistics programming guy, once said that there's no hallucinogenic or psychedelic drug in the world that could compare with simply changing into the consciousness of the person sitting next to you. He's talking into a big building, a room full of hundreds of people, and he's like, there's nothing, no psychedelic drug that can compare to simply seeing the world through the viewpoint of the person to the left or the right of you. And that's true, man. We've got the two remarkable people for all intents and purposes: the spirit, the hero of our story, and Gerard Schnabel, the little guy that through adversity has it in him that he can fly for whatever reason. And that was the beautiful thing about these spirit stories. And I want to take a look at some more of these spirit stories, but Eisner never shied away from just throwing in random fantastical elements like, hey, dude can fly. And this is the one that I wanted to take. You're not going to be able to see it that far away. Let me see if I can get it where we can zoom in. But yeah, see this background. See how for whatever reason it's flat up until that point, and he wants to add in another dimension, to a couple of places. And so it's a very odd juxtaposition, but it works, and you'll see Ditko doing that as well. Kind of like changing perspective. And we'll see how he plays around with that in just a minute. All right, so Spirit's rushing out to get the guys. Gerard Schnabel's kind of thrown out of the way, but he's focused on doing what he came to do. The guys see the Spirit. Oh no, we got to get away. So start climbing away. This dude's like, hey, let's just take the helicopter. We were literally almost in there. You're on your own, buddy. So not the brightest guys in the world. So we have the big punch out. We got Gerard Schnabel looking over the edge. Okay, it's time to show the world what I can do. I love this panel here. Look at this. It should technically be 3-point perspective because we have the vanishing point down there. And then we have, a vanishing point over here. But these buildings over here don't really follow to that horizon line. They almost follow towards the same vanishing point as this one over here. So that it creates, it's not quite 5-point perspective, curvilinear perspective, which there are. I would highly recommend looking up tutorials on YouTube. It's actually quite easy to do if you know how to do 1-point, 2-point, and 3-point perspective, to do a curvilinear perspective. But this, like following the same, really 2-point perspective, let's call it. It may be 3-point perspective. Yeah, I guess so, but it's a very odd. It's not like the other vanishing points are on the same horizon line, and sometimes that happens. But it gives us this curvilinear fisheye perspective, which is very cool, which adds in, along with all of the speed lines running down, adds this. It's a very effective panel in that it even to a lesser degree, it evokes that feeling of vertigo. Here is a tiny figure up on top of a giant building, hurling himself off into the space. Safety of the ground right here, no floor beneath. It's almost very Buddhist. It's almost very Zen-like in its application. And then we get to the last 2 pages, which are going to happen pretty fast, okay, and are going to give us the effect. And like I said, this is the page over here that's in Comics and Sequential Art that made me want to read this story. So we have Schnabel falling. So he's jumped off the roof. He's on the edge of the roof. We're forgetting the spirit. You see, the spirit is almost left back here to do his thing. And so we're going to focus on Schnabel, you know, moving past him, focusing on Schnabel, following us down into the next sequence. So we're moving, as we move in space, we're moving through time to the next sequence where he jumps off, falling, no longer falling, gracefully flying. Okay, so straight lines have become curved lines to indicate graceful flying. Also, his face tells us, the smile on his face tells us that he's flying. Otherwise, we could just say, well, he's twisting in the wind on his way down. But that little bit of information lets us know that he's flying and everything's okay. And again, we have this Ditko. I forget what that school is, but it was the school around the time of Eisner and Ditko. When Eisner would have been doing this and when Ditko would have been doing like Spider-Man and things like that. Slightly before that, but still had sway. And it's this, it's almost an impressionistic school, but it's like a post-industrial revolution type of impressionism, where it's these buildings done in very, like, it's just reduced into shapes and colors and etc. And so I've always enjoyed that. Again, simple shapes give us a background and give us information about the place, you know. This lets us know, hey, he's flying, you know. He's not anchored to the ground, not safe on a building. He's in the air, flying high above the city. Okay. And then all of a sudden, we're like, oh yeah, remember, the spirit's still chasing these guys. So he's already knocked out that one guy. These two have started climbing down. And Gerard Schnabel's like, hey, it's working. I'm flying. But, you know, no one's noticing me. Hey, how about that? So then we have the spirit jumping down, getting that guy. He's like, oh, he missed me, didn't even see me. I'm safe. I'll take him out. Now, bang. Oops, I missed him. Gerard Schnabel coming in. So we've had these two stories working separately, and then they're about to collide. So the spirit and Schnabel are about to collide. Now this one almost makes no sense. The whole idea is supposed to be that Schnabel got shot almost like a bulletproof vest for the spirit, because he was supposed to be aiming at the spirit. He didn't even notice the flying guy. But yet, as you can see, the spirit's way back here. This guy's aiming way over here blindly. But we'll just say that he was just firing blindly. And so anyway, as Schnabel was coming along to take a pass to show everybody, hey, look what I can do, boom, 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 gets fired upon. And this is where it happens really fast, and this is a very dramatic, it's not quite, it's very sparse. Think about it. It's really just 2 panels and then the rest, which is mostly text and 1 image. So Schnabel gets fired on. So this is where the 2 storylines have finally 100%, coalesced. Let me get my fingers in there. And so now Schnabel's gone. We see his hat. And the spirit is now jumping up there to punch that guy in the stomach and knock him out. And so then we come down, we follow the hat down, and as we don't pay attention to this, and then we notice that, but then we're supposed to basically come back up to this. So we're falling and rising at the same time, following this text. And so it's basically, don't cry for him, don't cry for Schnabel, because even though his lifeless body is laying there, everybody that stood around and didn't see him fly, they were the ones that were the actual victims, you know, because Schnabel had flown that day. He had finally let out that gift inside of him that he had been repressing for so long, and everybody else didn't get to witness that gift. Okay? So it's this very odd little morality tale told around, you know, a normal spirit bust him up, you know, like a normal spirit story where he's just out to get the bad guys. But it's done, really, we almost can't even count this page because it's just a warning, but it's setting us up, I guess, emotionally. But really, and we almost can't count that because that could have really been, it wouldn't have had the effect, but it could have been just pumped into this. So again, it's the brilliance of pacing. It's knowing, hey, I'm going to spend this amount on this, a full page from basically birth to no telling how old this is because, you know, he was 8 years old there. Over here, he's worked at a bank for 35 years, so he's got to be, you know, what, 40-something, 50 almost. Still looks quite young, though, and spry. Although back then, no telling when he would have started without the child labor laws. And then, and so, yeah, we've got, you know, 40-ish, 50-ish years until we get to the first panel. And then it's maybe an hour or two after that. That's done in 5 pages. And not only that, but we have 2 storylines going on within those 5 pages, and yet it's seamless. Okay? That gives us this impact, this emotional impact at the end. So, that's it. I just wanted to look at that. We'll take more. We'll take more of a glance, kind of behind the curtain. There are some really cool spirit stories in there that I want to look at. I would very much like to look at some of the principles that are working within that story and break them down in like comics and sequential art and graphic storytelling. Will Eisner's more practical sort of handbooks of the art. And please break out your books and study them. Don't just think that, you know, if I want to make comics, I just got to draw good. There are so many philosophies behind every single aspect of every single panel and how those panels are put together and then how those pages are put together and how those pages become a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. And hopefully some story beats in between that. And so that's what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to break all of this down where it's not just, oh, let's draw good. Let's make better comics. And again, these are not hard and fast rules. These are things that you're supposed to take and go, okay, let me figure out how I can utilize that in my own voice and my own style. So that it is an art rather than just 100% craft. Okay, and with that, I thank you very much. On to the next one.